Hi, welcome to Ask the Manager, and welcome to Congressman McGovern. We have our congressman who represents the second district at the Massachusetts House of Representatives, and you're certainly a champion for the people. And as I was researching, as much as I think I know about what you're doing, as I was researching it, I thought, oh, I forgot about that. You know what? So we're going to go through some of this information and be sure that the public knows what you're doing and how valuable you are to us, not just in Shrewsbury, but in Worcester County. So you had been, you are the top Democrat of the House Rules Committee, and you had been the chair for the 116th and 117th Congress.
Correct.
And so your goal at that point was to be open and transparent and bipartisan. Mm-hmm. And how did that go?
It went fairly well, I think, overall. Look, the Rules Committee is the oldest committee in the House of Representatives, and it's probably the most powerful committee that most people don't know anything about. But we decide what comes to the floor and in what form that it comes to the House floor. So you decide whether you have to vote on the bill and no amendments, or whether you vote on the bill and 2 amendments, or 1,000 amendments, or it's a free-for-all. And we also sometimes can adjust the text of a bill to reflect updated information. And so I always would look at legislation to see whether it adversely impacted Massachusetts, and if it did, we would try to fix it before it went to the House floor. But I also believe that we ought to have what we call regular order, that bills that go to the floor ought to go through the Committee of Jurisdiction. They ought to be debated and amended. They come to the Rules Committee. We ought to allow for different points of view to be heard and debated on the House floor, and then we have a vote. And so I'm really proud of the fact that we did things better than that we had in the past. I instituted a 72-hour rule saying that we're not going to bring a bill to the floor that at least you didn't have 72 hours to review it. And then the Republicans took over, and they kind of shut the system down. We had the most closed Congress. The last 2 Congresses have been the most closed Congresses in history. More completely closed rules where all views, including Republican views, were shut out. I don't think that's the way our government should run. And if you have the votes to do something, well, that's where the majority is. Let's do it. But to try to win and rig by rigging the system so you can't have amendments and you can't have debate, I don't think is the right thing to do. So if I ever get a chance to be chairman again, we're going to try to reverse the current trend.
Now, I wasn't going to go there, but I do have to ask this. I had this flashback. You were on the podium on January 6th.
Yeah. So January 6th, excuse me, when we were in session to certify the results of the election, and we don't have any TVs in the chamber, so none of us knew what was going on. But I noticed a bunch of security people went up to Nancy Pelosi, who was then the speaker, and she was in the chair. And then she motioned to me to come up and take over for her. And she said, I'll be right back. In fact, she left her phone there. She thought she was going right back. But when she left, she was whisked away and never came back. And so I was there and had to, preside over the session until it became clear that something was not right outside the chamber. I brought the session to a close, and I oversaw the evacuation of everyone. And when I walked off the House floor into the Speaker's lobby, which is right off the House floor, there's a set of doors that are glass from the midway up. And I was shocked to see like hundreds of people with smashing their fists and baseball bats against the glass, cracking the glass, trying to get at us. The police were on our side of the door, had their guns drawn. I mean, these people looked manic. Mm-hmm.
So it was unbelievable.
It was unbelievable. And there were some police officers who were outside the door who were being beaten.
And you could see that?
I could see that. I could see that. And so I'll never forget it. And just as we turned the corner is when they broke through, and then the police responded, and this woman, Ashley Babbitt, was shot. And then they dispersed. And so what I witnessed that day, not only the beating of law enforcement officers, not just Capitol Police, but there were other police forces from surrounding areas that were there. Some of the police died from their injuries a few days later. 140 law enforcement officials were severely wounded, and they destroyed some of the property in the Capitol, spread feces on the walls and on desks in the Capitol. Staff members were hiding under the desks, locked in closets, and and I just never thought I would see anything like that. I mean, the last time the Capitol had been breached was in 1812, and that was by the British. And that this would happen, I was stunned as it unfolded.
And when you look back now and you see film clips of this, and you know that you were there, what do you think?
Well, I was really horrified that our new president pardoned everybody. I mean, these are cop beaters, and I'm surprised because we all have social media accounts, and you're not supposed to read the comments, but every once in a while I peek. But the number of people who comment that nothing happened that day, or the number of people I bump into, I mean, at airports and sometimes even at my own district, who say it was a peaceful day, and I'm like, here's the video, here's the video,
Yeah.
and they'll say AI, artificial intelligence, and no, this is the video. I was there. And that's one of the problems we're having right now. It's not just a national problem, but statewide and locally as well. There's such a thing as an objective fact. I mean, this is a pen, right? It's not a glass of wine. It's a pen. We can argue whether it's a good pen or a bad pen. That's fine. But we shouldn't be arguing whether it's a pen. We're living in an age now where people are getting information from sources that are giving false information, that are pushing conspiracy theories. And so, we're in this period where we can't even debate the facts. And, when Trump pardoned the January 6th rioters, I mean, I walked through the Capitol that morning he did that, and I look in the face of the police that are protecting our lives. They just protected him and all of us at his inauguration, right? And what a slap in the face to them. I mean, they risk their lives for us every single day, and they do it effectively in terms of protecting us. Most people don't even know the craziness that they encounter every day when people try to do bad things, and they're always there. And it just sends such a bad signal. And these are people. Some of them, really do want to overthrow the government. The Proud Boys, the Oath Keepers, the members of racist militia groups. They all got released. They all got pardoned, and many of them went out and bragged that they're going to go out and buy more guns. And you're like, two of them have been arrested so far. One of them was just killed in an encounter with law enforcement officials, who was resisting arrest. So, if we want to create a climate in this country where people feel safe, you can't pardon violent criminals who did what these people did on January 6th. And I'm pretty good about like moving on. I was surprised how taken aback I was when he pardoned these people. And when I was complaining about it on the House floor during one of the debates that we were having, and my aide, this was just last week, put a piece of paper in front of me and said that one of my colleagues, who was sympathetic to the rioters, had brought them into the House chamber. They were in the balcony, and they were watching the debate. These are the people who tried to kill us, are welcomed back into the Capitol by a member of Congress. And so in any event,
you try to move on and do your business.
Right. And we have to. We look at the end of the day. I think we need to remind people of what happened. We can't whitewash history. We shouldn't want to whitewash history. We don't want this to ever happen again. But we also need to understand that, we also have to function as a legislative body and get stuff done for people. I mean, and so here we are.
Speaking of that, you're also on the Agriculture Committee.
Correct.
And you always talk and take action to fight world hunger.
Right.
And it makes me feel like I need to go to church because a lot of what you believe
Right.
and what your actions are related to fighting world hunger, making sure people are taken care of. It seems like the philosophy of what you do is always to take care of people, whether it's hunger or veterans, which we'll get into as we go along.
Well, that's what we all got into public service, and we all serve in our capacities because we want to help people. That's why we do this stuff. And it's when we talk about hunger, it's not just halfway around the world; it's halfway down the block. I mean, there are people in Shrewsbury, as you know, who are food insecure, who miss meals on a regular basis, and these people sometimes we don't even know that. I mean, they work, or they're senior citizens who have worked all their life and they've retired, or they're veterans who have fought in our wars and are finding it hard to make ends meet with rising costs of everything and paying rents and heating bills and all this other stuff. And in the United States of America, there are 40 million Americans, 40 million, who don't know where the next meal is going to come from, who are food insecure or hungry. We live in the richest country in the history of the world, and we've got 40 million people who are hungry. That's unconscionable, right? And again, these people defy any stereotype. I mean, the majority of people who are on SNAP, which used to be known as food stamps, right, work. They work. They're doing everything we want. They're working. They don't earn enough to be able to pay all their expenses and put food on the table. And so your local food pantries here, and we have our food bank up the street. Right. They're at capacity. They can't meet the demand. So, my view is that we ought to view food as a fundamental human right. We ought to make sure that food is not only affordable, but that everybody has access to good, decent, nutritious food. And it's not just being a nice guy to advocate for that. It's also, if you are fiscally conservative, you should want to join this battle to end hunger because it's costly. People who go without meals, especially senior citizens, on a regular basis, take their medication without a meal, end up in the emergency room, right? Children who go to school hungry, even though in Massachusetts we have universal school meals for everybody, but if they come to school on Monday hungry, they're not ready to learn in the classroom. They fall behind. Same with workers, less productive if you're food insecure or hungry. And if you don't have access to decent food, you end up with chronic illnesses like diabetes or heart disease or whatever. And again, it is costly to our system. And one of the things I did with President Biden is I got him to do a White House conference on hunger, health, and nutrition. That was the second conference on this ever. The first one was in 1969. And one of the things we're trying to do is make the connection between our medical systems and nutrition. And you can become a doctor in this country and never have to take a course in nutrition. It seems to me that I want the best heart surgeon in the world, but maybe I want to see if I can prevent you from needing open heart surgery. And I've met with people who I met with somebody who had diabetes, pretty severely, and his doctor told him that things are probably going to get worse. He's probably going to lose his eyesight, and there may have to be some amputations. And he said, well, what can I do? And the doctor said, well, I don't know. Just, you pick the short straw, take your medication. And he then met with a different group of people who pointed him in a different direction toward changing his dietary habits. And anyway, he reversed his condition. And he said to me, this is good for me because I'm going to have a longer life and a less complicated life. It's good for you because if I, lost my eyesight or had to have multiple amputations and I couldn't work, I'm going to need to rely on you to help keep me afloat. Yeah. And I'm going to need you to help pay for some of my medical expenses. And so, we just need to start thinking a little bit out of the box. If we want to control costs, and not have healthcare rationing and not have you pay more out-of-pocket expenses, then let's find ways to save money for the system, and this is one of the ways.
You also have made sure that military families are screened for hunger.
Yeah, absolutely.
That just blew my mind. It's like, what do you mean? They're hungry?
Well, we have, you talk to our local food pantries here. Lots of military families are showing up needing food. Talk to the people at Veterans Inc. And they will tell you the people that are coming through their doors. If you have served this country in our military, if you have fought for this country, God, the least we ought to be able to do is make sure you're not hungry. So we're making some strides in the right direction, but I think we're at a point now we have to be concerned about any cuts to programs like SNAP and nutrition programs. Somebody asked me, what is the average benefit from SNAP? And it's about $2.10 per person per meal. That's the average benefit, $2.10 per person per meal. You can't even buy a cup of coffee for that, right? So that's why people, even on SNAP, end up at food pantries and food banks before the month is out. There's a proposal right now in Washington to move it from $2.10 to $1.40. And again, with all due respect to all the incredible, generous people here and all around the country who support our food banks and our food pantries and who are so generous, we can't keep up with the demand now. And it will just get much, much worse if we move in that direction. So let's all agree that nobody should be hungry in this country. And let's all do a better job of trying to focus in on how do we promote better nutrition and in our schools and and in our communities. And I think if we do that, people will be in better shape, and people will also live longer, and it'll save the system a lot more money.
So let's skip around a bit. Some local issues. You have been clearly responsible for getting federal funding for our Route 20 project that's going to take place. What do you want to tell us about that?
Yeah, well, the Congressman has secured, I don't even know what the final bill is because it keeps going up, for us to be able to completely redevelop from South Street to Valenti Drive and make critical safety improvements along that corridor. It's a box widening initiative, and it allows for pedestrian access and will allow for also economic development along the way. So it's been a pleasure working with you and your staff to make those critical improvements to Route 20.
Well, Shrewsbury's lucky they have you, and I appreciate you and your team. Look, it's not the sexiest subject in the world, but road improvements and infrastructure are vitally important, and they're expensive.
And we've been lucky enough to be able to complain that there's construction everywhere.
Right. No, I know.
Roads, the traffic.
That's the thing.
Good.
But that's the thing is that everybody complains that we don't have the money to do something, and then you get the money to do it, and then there's delays, and people are complaining about the delays. But whatever. But we're getting old as a country, and our infrastructure is getting old, and our needs keep on changing, and we need to move in that direction. That's why I was really proud we were able to pass the biggest infrastructure bill in history, short of the original creation of the interstate highway system. Some of it, we're nervous now that there's some talk about trying to roll that back. I'm like, we've got bridges in Massachusetts that are older than most of the other states in this country. And, I saw an engineering analysis of the Cape Cod bridges. I say a prayer now when I drive over those bridges if I go to the Cape. You
put a parachute
right.
on.
Infrastructure is important, right? And it's not just roads and bridges, it's water and sewer. We have to, we have to update, not just because we can, it's because, for health and well-being of our community. So, no, I am happy. And I'm hoping we can find even more opportunities to be able to collaborate.
Yeah, the project I know is well over $16 million, and sometimes it's really complicated to think about how we actually get dollars from Washington into Massachusetts. But the Congressman in this project helped. It was simple application and advocacy, and we look forward to starting the project in 2026. So it's moved rapidly.
We had earmarking ability, which has now been temporarily suspended, but luckily you guys get in before they banned it. But hopefully we'll bring it back. But look, one of the challenges with some of our federal programs is that without the ability to get an earmark, the process of applying for federal monies is complicated, and it's not a sure thing. And sometimes the bigger cities with huge staffs, get the leg up, and they, kind of crowd out some of the communities that are, not New York City or Boston. But the infrastructure challenges are everywhere. They're in our urban areas, our suburban areas, and our rural areas. I have a district that has urban areas, like Worcester, suburban areas like Shrewsbury and Westboro and Northborough. I have rural areas, out west. I go beyond Amherst and Northampton and Greenfield. And some of those smaller towns in particular are desperate for infrastructure upgrades. And even they need basic things like a fire engine. We helped in Bernardston get them a new fire truck, which was great, except the new fire truck is bigger than the fire barn.
We know that.
Right. Yeah. So we working with them to try to make that adjustment, but whatever. But this is about the safety and well-being of our community, and
So another thing that I think needs to be public, it has been, but I don't want people to forget, is that you were very, very responsible for the VA building that went up on Belmont Street abutting UMass. And that whole VA system is phenomenal, and you just brought it to another level. When I looked back, there were, at the opening ceremony, it said that there were multiple speakers that credited you for bringing that to fruition.
Yeah. Well, the vision really was Dr. Collins, who's the chancellor at UMass Medical School.
I have visions. It takes more than a vision.
Right. No, but look, I'm grateful, to our veterans. We live in the greatest country in the world, the freest country in the world. Not by accident, but because we had people that defended this country. And one of the challenges for living here in Shrewsbury or Worcester or Central Massachusetts is that if you're a veteran and you look for care, you have to go to Northampton or you have to go to Boston. Northampton's not a short drive, and Boston, getting through all the traffic can be a nightmare. And some of the older veterans who get bussed in, they get it there early in the morning, and they can't get a ride home until later in the afternoon. So it's a kind of a huge ordeal. And we thought there ought to be something here in Central Massachusetts. And so we helped get some federal earmarks for that. And we worked with the VA secretary at the time, Dennis McDonough. I was when Obama was president. And he was there at the ribbon cutting. And with Dr. Collins and with the whole incredible VA team, we're able to, build that facility there. And it wasn't an easy thing to do because we thought we had the VA on board, which was great, and then they were not on board, and then they were on board, and they were not on board. Then finally, everybody got on board, and then there was the money, and so for a lot of the veterans that I talked to who utilize that facility, it's still relatively new, state of the art, incredible care, and it makes me proud that our community, wants to make sure our veterans have the very best, and so I'm really proud of that, but it, like in anything, and I think you can attest to this, even in the town of Shrewsbury, it does take a village.
It does.
And so there are a lot of good people got on board, and it took longer than I wanted, but it happened. So.
And tell us about the Wounded Warrior Service Dog Program, which, while we're staying with veterans here for a bit.
So anyway, it's a bill that I passed that provides funding for veterans who could benefit from service dogs. And I didn't really know much about it, but I met with a lot of veterans, who basically told me how service dogs saved their lives. I met with one veteran who from the Iraq War, who had suffered all kinds of injuries and was internally scarred. I mean, terrible post-traumatic stress. Had a family, but literally couldn't leave his room, and he just was basically kind of in a terrible situation, heavily medicated. And he said, I wasn't being much of a husband, I wasn't being much of a father, I couldn't do anything. And then somebody came and introduced him to a service dog, and it transformed his life. He got off the medication, and he's back into the workforce. He's going to his kids' games, and he said and I talked to more and more veterans who benefited from it. But again, there was no program to help provide the funding to help make the connection. And so that's what we did, and it's been incredibly successful. And every year we have veterans who benefit from the program come to Washington and talk about the incredible benefits of service dogs. And for any of us who have ever had any pets, I mean, we know that there's something, I don't know, like healing about about being surrounded by a dog that kind of loves you and unconditionally and always seems to have your back, and you have this kind of connection. But it makes sense when you think about it. But in our VA health system, in our health system in general, people weren't making that connection. So that's happening, and that's a good thing.
I can tell we're going to run out of time fast here, so I'm going to jump around a little bit. One more thing. Tell us how you increased the military death gratuity to families of military personnel killed in active duty.
So we had an amendment to the defense appropriations bills to do that. It's the right thing to do. It was inadequate prior to that, and we got a good bipartisan vote on it.
Okay, and there were the floods in Leominster.
Right.
And they first got rejected by FEMA to get funding for that, but you, along with a couple of our senators and Governor Healy, made that happen.
Yeah, we there's still some challenges in Leominster, but they're getting a significant amount of help. And by the way, we're all focused on the wildfires in California and the hurricanes in North Carolina, but we've had some pretty big natural disasters here. The flooding in Leominster. Again, I represent a lot of agricultural communities. We've had severe droughts and severe flooding that have basically almost put a lot of our farms out of business. And we were just able to get a set aside in the continuing resolution appropriations bill that we passed in December to provide relief for those farmers in New England who were adversely impacted. And here's an example. Most of the farm programs are geared toward the mega farms, hundreds and hundreds of acres. That's not what we have here. We have farms, that are 5 acres to 50 acres, maybe 100 acres at most, but not, what you see in the Midwest. Those farms here are every bit as important to our economy as those big farms are out in California and in the Midwest. And, what we learned during COVID, that it's important that we protect and maintain our local food systems, because you just never know what might happen. And we want to make sure we can depend on a local source for all of our foods. And one of the things we're trying to do right now is to try to make sure that the school feeding programs that are going on in schools, that they're utilizing more and more local produce and stuff locally grown. I took the mayor of Boston, Mayor Wu, out to Hadley, which is in my district, and she visited a farm that provides all the squash and the carrots and the vegetables for a big chunk of the schools in the metropolitan Boston area. And so she's made a commitment to say, we're going to change our purchasing habits here to make a bigger percentage of what we buy from local farms here. And that's good because it helps our farmers. It's good, fresh food. And if you care about climate change like I do, it's a lot better for the environment to ship something from Hadley to Boston than it is from California to Boston. And so we're making some progress there.
I had my grandfather Largess worked for the railroad, and so did all of his sons at some point. And so he always got frustrated with seeing too many trucks on the road, because he said the way to keep America moving is through the train system. And you've been involved with trying to improve the train system, and also not just to get the unsafe trucks off the road, to put this all into the train system, which is a safer way. But you also want to extend to Central Mass, which I think is desperately needed, and to Western Mass, the train system.
Yeah, so I respect those men and women who drive our trucks, and
Yeah.
they're incredible. I don't want them driving trains on the road. So
Yeah.
I'm a big advocate of not increasing truck size and truck weights on our roads. And by the way, your infrastructure will last longer without heavier and bigger trucks. When I first got elected to Congress, I remember I had some local officials come to me and complain that we wanted to renovate and rehabilitate Union Station, and they wanted to put a casino there. And I was like, no, I mean, this is a historic site. Well, and I said, we want to get commuter rail back to Worcester and Central Mass. And they were like, it'll never happen. Well, now we have a renovated train station and we have commuter rail. We now want to extend that commuter rail out west. And, because, some people work out west, or some people live out west that might want to work in central Massachusetts. We want to make it easy for people to commute. And again, we went through a period where we kind of neglected our rail systems. Now we all want them back. And for some of my smaller communities out west, it's important because without increasing access to those communities, I worry that they won't be viable anymore. And by that I mean some of these small towns, they can't even afford to put a town manager in place. They can't afford the basics, and people are leaving. And so then what happens, right? So if we want to get people to live in some of these areas, let's make it easy for them to get to them. And that's where enhanced commuter rail out west would be great. And my other goal is, as somebody who every once in a while takes the train to Washington, because air travel is not always dependable, and we have winters and snow and things get canceled. I want Amtrak to have their Acela stop in Worcester, so I can get a train from Worcester to New York to Boston. Right now I have to drive to Boston or to Providence to get on the train that will take me to Washington.
Right.
And we're the second largest city in New England. This metropolitan area, which includes Shrewsbury, I mean, it enhances the population that would utilize that. We're much bigger, and we're much better than Providence. So, love Providence.
Not to mention, if we have to pay for the MBTA laws that are being put in place, we should at least be able to benefit from the train.
Yeah, and that all, because there were a lot of people who would live here who might want to work in New York City.
Right.
And that kind of train travel, makes it possible.
So now, affordable health care, the Inflation Reduction Act, tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I mean, look, we have the Affordable Care Act, and more people have health care than ever before. We still want to make sure that more things get covered and that out-of-pocket expenses don't go up. That's one of the reasons why we need to be thinking in terms of smart moves, like integrating nutrition more into our healthcare system to lower costs, so that the burden doesn't fall on individual people. And then we got to figure out a way to lower prescription drugs. I mean, one of the things that started to happen is we passed a bill that began to lower prescription drugs. I mean, things like insulin have gone down, and they're stable. And
There were people not taking their
right,
insulin because they couldn't afford it.
So Trump just did a executive order which will make it more difficult to force pharmaceutical companies to lower their drug prices. We need to figure out a way.
So protect the
big companies.
big company, not the
Yeah.
people.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about it, I mean, when we talk about national security, it also includes whether you can, afford your prescription drugs. Because if you can't, then, and you need them, then you get sicker, and you die. I mean, let's be honest.
Is the Medicare prescription drug cap that came from $8,000 down to $2,000 this year, is that safe?
So far it is. But we need to look. I'm all for, if you can find new miracle drugs and new cures, I'm all for you making some money off of that, right? But finding new breakthrough drugs and cures doesn't do me any good if I can't have access to them, and if I can't afford them. And and the deal is, these companies can still make a lot of money, and not gouge the American citizen. I mean, the drugs that we pay a lot of money for here, you can get the same drugs in Canada for a reduced price. I mean, or in Europe for
Why?
reduced price. Well, that's it. I mean, we allow special interests to be able to manipulate our system so they can make the maximum amount of money. And look, I want people who do great things to be successful, but we have to understand that, you know, corporations are not people, and corporations are not thinking about, boy, what is in your best interest, and oh, how can I make your life easier, and how can I make your life better? What they're thinking of is how they make more money. That's just a fact. And so, you know, we gotta understand that, and we gotta every once in a while push back at their excesses.
I think I need to let the town manager get a word in edgewise. I know you have some questions for our congressman. Before I go any further, what would you like to?
Well, thank you. I mean, so two main areas, one really practical and one maybe point of privilege, inspirational. So the first with PFAS, you know, it's a big challenge for all communities. And we talk about corporations, and they created this, you know, in some ways wonderful feat of science. In other ways, now it's polluting everything. And now the town of Shrewsbury is on the hook for, you know, a $28.5 million treatment plant. So it's really just, you know, that continued plea as science starts to catch up with us in some ways. Oftentimes, as you know, local government is the one that's on the hook to fix it for our residents because we're that last line of defense. So just any continued support that we can get from you in Washington, which you've already provided, but just making sure that those corporations are responsible for what they're creating.
Yeah. I mean, one is that they need to be held liable for it, and the federal government needs to do its fair share and make sure that communities are not left, you know, hanging there on their own. I mean, I mean, I learned about PFAS from some local firefighters, and this woman Diane Cotter, who was a big advocate for PFAS, and I learned more from some of our local officials, and everybody was agreeing that this is a bad stuff, but nobody wanted to take responsibility. And you know, now that's beginning to change, but I don't think it's too much to expect that, you know, government, you know, take a leading role in making sure that our environment and our water is safe, and for our firefighters, the equipment that they wear, that is safe, because there's PFAS in a lot of the fire equipment, and these companies that knowingly continue to do stuff that they know was going to be harmful, they continue to do it. I mean, there has to be some responsibility on them as well.
Yeah. And so I've been working with a bunch of colleagues at the city and town manager level across the country on trust in government. Big topic, right? One of the things that we've been working on is really trying to get deeper into our communities and make that human connection with people. But I would just love to hear your thoughts from your perspective and your decades of experience. What can we do to restore some of that trust with our residents? Yeah,
so I think we have to be accessible, and I think we have to listen, and I think we, and we have to tell the people the truth. You know, sometimes the truth is not nice to hear, but people are owed the truth, and not everything is about winning an election. And I mean, you don't have to run for election, but the bottom line is what's happening is that people are more interested in how do I win the next election rather than how do I do the right stuff. Sometimes doing the right stuff means you don't win re-election. But at the end of the day, what are we here for unless we're here to try to improve our community? And I worry that we're moving away from how do we work together to get stuff done to, like, I want to blame you, I want to blame you, I want to blame you, I want to blame you. You know, when I was in college, I worked my way through college as a paid intern for Senator George McGovern, no relation. He's the guy who ran for president against Nixon in '72, but this was the late '70s. And I used to go to his office every day, and I'd look at his schedule, and I'd notice a couple of times drinks with Senator Barry Goldwater. McGovern was a big liberal, Goldwater was a big conservative. He ran for president, lost to Lyndon Johnson in a landslide. And I would say to McGovern, like, why are you having drinks with Barry Goldwater? And he would smile and say, why do you ask? I said, well, I don't know. He just isn't he like a super right winger? And he laughed. He said, look, yeah, we have differences of opinion, but I like him. He tells good jokes. He enjoys a good drink. You know, we have a good time together. But here's the deal. remember, you don't have to agree on everything to agree on something. And there's something we agree on, we work together to get done. And if it's a McGovern Goldwater Amendment or Goldwater McGovern Amendment, we're unbeatable and we get stuff done. We fight about a lot, but we get stuff done. We have to get back to that mindset of getting stuff done. At the end of the day, it's not, who had the best soundbite, who had the best tweet on X, right? It's like, can I point to anything that I made a difference on, or that you made a difference on, or that you made a difference on? I mean, and if you can't, then you start to say, like, what are we here for? I tell people, so I over the years, I've gotten to befriend His Holiness the Dalai Lama. And I went to see him, this is his 90th year. And so he gave me these Tibetan prayer beads. He said, he blessed them and gave them to me. And he says they help me with my anxiety, my worries, my fears, and any negativity. They're not working yet, but anyway. But I think of him all the time when he kind of says that too much of what we all do, and it's not just in politics. Too much of what we all do is confrontation, and we try to blame people and demonize people. We have to change our attitudes here and start focusing toward how do we work together to make this world better. And I mean that's I don't know how many more years I want to do this, but that's why every day I get up and I think, what can we do anything good today? Right. And sometimes it might be just helping Mrs. O'Leary find her lost Social Security check. And one time I not too long ago, I got a call from a father of a groom. He said, my son is getting married to this wonderful woman tomorrow, and they're going on a honeymoon to Europe. I said, terrific. Why are you calling me? He says, well, he just looked at his passport and it expired like 3 years ago. Oh, no. So to the save, and we moved heaven and earth. We got him the passport, and he was able to go on his honeymoon, and I think they're still married, I hope. But in any event, sometimes it's that, but sometimes it's like helping with an infrastructure project, or it's the VA facility at the UMass campus, or it's working to protect some open space for people. But I think we all need to get up every day and figure out what good can we do today, because the one thing I'm kind of learning as I'm getting older is like time goes by fast. I mean, like my time in Congress has gone by in a flash, right? And so, just take every day and figure out what good can we do.
Pretty good. Yeah. So, also you supported a lot of biomedical research in Worcester County in various ways, with WPI, with UMass Memorial, and the genetics disease research at UMass Memorial. What do you want to tell us about that?
Well, I mean, a biotech, bioengineering field has been, a great source of economic development in this region, not just Worcester, but surrounding communities, right? Lots of jobs, but dedicated to trying to find ways to make our life better, whether it's a cure or to prevent people from getting, a particular disease or whatever. And so I'm really proud of what we were able to do in that area. And the other thing I've learned over the years, as governments, the federal government's role in terms of investing in some of these things has become smaller and smaller. You have to build partnerships. You mentioned WPI. I mean, we transformed a blighted area in Worcester into the Gateway Park project, which is a bioengineering, kind of a development site, and it is incredible. And we need to keep. We couldn't have done it without WPI, but we also needed the city, we needed the state, and we had lots of federal support as well. So we have to kind of work as a team. And sometimes we're not very good at working as a team.
And that has also brought businesses to Shrewsbury.
Yeah.
I mean, we have the three, high-tech manufacturers and biopharma related businesses moving into Shrewsbury now. So, I mean, it helps the region. And
you also probably have, I know you have people, because I know some of the people who live here, live in Shrewsbury, and they love Shrewsbury. What's not to love about Shrewsbury, right? Everybody, it's an incredible place.
It's paradise.
Well, I will tell you that, I was at a conference yesterday in Boston, and I met a guy who was a Marine, retired Marine. He's now working in the government, but he is living in Shrewsbury. He wasn't born here. He never lived here until he decided to retire. and he and his wife live here, and they love it. And he went through all the restaurants and all the different things. Look, this is a special place. We want to keep it special, and we want to make sure that that it never becomes too much for people to be able to live here. We want to make sure that you have the resources you need to make the improvements that will protect people here. We support our firefighters and our police officers. We want to make sure we do that. And so,
But listen to this one. I didn't know this. And it's amazing that it even had to be an issue. With Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley, you co-sponsored a bill to get wigs paid for for cancer patients. Now, how awful for a woman to lose her hair and then have to walk around without hair, and now the wigs are part of that coverage.
But that's the point. I mean, like sometimes people don't make the connections. Like, what does a wig have to do with healthcare, right?
Right.
I mean, a lot.
It's devastating for many women.
And people going through cancer treatments, it's brutal, right? And but we want to make sure that again, that we're doing things that are actually helping people, and not just sound bites.
And the other part to that is that, and you mentioned it, you're busy not with just big bills or bills that we read about. You're helping people every day with little things. And those little things are very, very important, like you just described. It's someone needs help because they didn't get their check on time and they need that money. And someone else, needed a passport. All those things, that happens in your office every day.
Yeah, I get a great team, and but if you're a senior citizen and for whatever reason your check doesn't arrive, and you're living on a fixed budget, how do you pay your groceries? Then how do you pay your bills? Your rent. And so it is important that people get what they're entitled to, and that there's somebody there to help them try to track down if something is lost, because it could be very complicated. So if you just call up the Social Security Administration or some of these federal agencies, lots of luck getting a human being on the phone. And sometimes you have to press 1 if you want this, press 3 if you want, and then sometimes you press the wrong one, you disconnect, you have to start all over again. It's very, very frustrating. And so we try to help kind of make some of these experiences a little less difficult for people.
You worked to guarantee high standards in VAs. And when you see on the news that somewhere in the country they have this terrible VA system that provides poor care and all that, related now to whistleblowers, and whistleblowers being protected, and to make sure that standard is where it belongs. We're lucky here in Worcester County, and even in all of Massachusetts, to have the systems that we have. But in other places, it's not the case.
Well, we also have advocates like you and others who would never tolerate allowing being quiet if the system were substandard. Look, there's always room for improvement, and I appreciate our VA here because they're always trying to do the very, very best for our veterans. But these are our veterans, right? So, people who have protected this country, to subject them to substandard care, that's unacceptable. And shame on those communities that aren't making a big deal about it. And we're trying to make sure that nationwide we get to a standard of care for everybody that is amongst the best anywhere in the world. And that's the way it should be. We ought to be aspiring to that for everybody in this country. And so we have some great healthcare facilities here in Massachusetts. What I'm worried about is kind of the recent trend of hospitals closing in some of the areas. As you move west into my district, Neshoba doesn't close. The hospital in Leominster doesn't provide OB services, and Haywood almost went bankrupt, but they're coming back, thankfully. But it's like, so healthcare has to be affordable, but it also has to be accessible. And if it's not accessible, then that's not good for our community. So we need to do better.
My mind's going all over the place. I once read a book that's left an impression on me for life, and it was years ago. And it's called My Father, My Son, and it was written by Admiral Zumwalt, who was in charge of giving the go to drop Agent Orange on Vietnam. And then his son ended up getting cancer because it got dropped on him too. And I notice here that you voted yes on which I never knew, the Blue Water Navy Veterans Act. So this Agent Orange stays in my mind. And this extends the presumptive coverage of Agent Orange related illnesses to veterans who served up to 12 miles offshore Vietnam from 1962 to 1975. Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, because, well, first of all, when the whole Agent Orange thing first came to light, we had some people in our government that didn't want to admit it, right? So we went through the denial stage. And then when the science became overwhelming that Agent Orange did cause cancer, they had to admit it. Now they want to say, well, it could only affect you if you were in this certain area. Well, what we're learning now is that the number of cancer cases, within a radius of 12 miles, people are still getting it. So the deal is we should extend the coverage to you, right? You should get the help, you should get the coverage you need, because we owe you that, right? And again, I don't think that our government intentionally put service members in a situation where we ourselves were responsible for doing harm to them. But sometimes, we do things where we find out that that's exactly what happened. Well, then we have to live up to it. We have to accept responsibility, and we can't, blame people or ignore the problem and hope that it goes away. Yeah, it does cost money, but you know what? They deserve this, and so, that's why we moved in that direction.
And then you had the Fight Veteran Suicide Act, which is big.
Suicide is a huge problem. It's a problem not only amongst veterans, it's a problem in our country. Unfortunately, it's on the rise. And you serve in combat, you see some terrible things. There's a lot that goes on, right, in the aftermath. And I even worry now. Again, we're talking about veterans, but even outside of that, I mean, we have a lot of young people that are dealing with a lot of challenges, and some of the things that are coming out of government are maybe isolating them rather than respecting them. And we're seeing higher rates of suicide. And look, every life is precious, and we ought to make sure we're doing everything we can to help people. Yeah,
unfortunately, one of those communities that's impacted by that is first responders as well.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
We're seeing a higher incidence there, and anything that we can do to help those folks with the things that they see and how they help us is so critical.
Well, that's it. I mean, and for those of us who don't always see those things, sometimes you don't make the connection, but you can see some things that are, that leave pretty deep scars, and we need to make sure the support is there to help you get through it.
So also the Legal Services for Homeless Veterans Act and Military Housing Oversight Service Members Protection Act, which gives the Secretary of Defense statutory, who is our Secretary of Defense? I know.
Yeah, I know.
Statutory responsibility to unsure privatized military housing, and it providers, and they have to meet the terms of the contract. Yeah. So you're protecting the military in all different ways.
Right. And we also need to be committed to making sure that no veteran is homeless. We have to be committed to make sure no person in this country is homeless, right? But especially within our veteran community, and we're seeing trends going in the wrong direction. And hopefully some of these things that we're doing will reverse that. But I mean, food and housing seem to me to be basic human rights that everybody should have access to.
You would think.
Yeah.
So gun violence. We could go on for hours just about gun violence. But what I don't understand is, I mean, first of all, you talk about needing gun safety laws, and it protects not just the person that's injured, it protects the gun owners, and it addresses this gun violence epidemic. And it's with common sense background checks, banning assault weapons used in mass shootings, gun violence prevention, and community safety act. So you're not against someone owning a gun.
No.
You're saying get it out of the hands of the people that...
Like, why do you need a weapon of war if you're a hunter? I mean, I mean, really, It makes, and people say, "No, it's my constitutional right." Well, that's not what the Constitution says. But if you believe that, we have the First Amendment. It says you have freedom of speech, but you can't go into a crowded movie theater and yell fire because you're threatening the well-being and the safety of everybody else there. It is so easy to get a gun in this country, and we have more guns than there are people in this country. And almost every week or every month there is a school shooting where young kids are killed or teachers are killed, and yet it's happening so much now that it's almost like it's underreported. We're not shocked anymore because it's happening all the time. But what if it was your kid? Right. And I worry, my kids are 26 and 23. I worry about that all the time when they go to a concert or they go to, I'm like, just look for the exits. And
can't you watch it on TV?
Yeah, like, why would you want to go to the concert? You can download it on your phone, right? But it's like, and again, there needs to, if you're a gun owner, you have to have some responsibility. I mean, some of these shootings, we find out that parents leave their guns, their assault weapons unlocked, or they give a young kid, like an assault weapon as a gift, and he goes out and shoots people with it. Look, I don't know what our fascination is with guns. My brothers-in-laws are both hunters, and I respect that. And even they get it. I mean, they figure this out. If you're a police officer, talk to our police officers. They don't like the idea that when they walk into a difficult situation, somebody might have a weapon that is like 9 times, 10 times more powerful than anything that they might have. This is crazy. This is insane. And we have this culture that kind of that glamorizes these weapons, and people are dying. People are dying, and we can do something about it. That's what's so frustrating.
What would you like to tell us about small business and entrepreneurs? Well,
I mean, look, small businesses are the backbone of our economy, and one of the reasons why we fight very hard to get these new companies into our area is because they support our small businesses, whether it be our restaurants or our local grocery stores or our boutiques or whatever. I mean, they all and I think we have to make sure that we're not over-regulating our small businesses, and we have to make sure that at the local level that there's an easy pathway for them to become a small business, and to be able to thrive in our communities. But look, my dad owned a package store for a gazillion years. He was a small businessman, and he worked hard at it, and he was able to not only help raise a family, but he helped a lot of members in the community there. He hired a lot of people over the years. A lot of people get their start in the workforce working in his store, and and he built relationships in the community. So everybody had each other's back. If there was something suspicious going on down the street and your business was there, he'd call, and vice versa. So I'm a product of small businesses.
We're running out of time. In fact, we have less than a minute. In less than a minute, what can you tell us about foreign policy?
Oh God, I mean, well, the world's kind of a mess, and but on foreign policy, I'm going to say what I would say on domestic policy. Our focus ought to be on how we uphold human rights, how we make people's lives better, and how we give people hope. I'm deeply troubled by the violence in the Middle East, like I think everybody is. I'm worried about Russia and Vladimir Putin, who I think is, not I think he's an evil man, quite frankly. I worry about the impact of China and all that kind of stuff. But there's a way out of it. And I think one of the things I tell people, because I've traveled a lot around the world, people look to us, as kind of this, the high standard. They admire our democracy, they admire our freedom, and they would like to aspire to be that. They think we care about human rights, and we should care about human rights. So we should live up to those expectations. We don't need to be the bully of the world. We don't need to run the entire world, but we need to be an example to the world, and that's what I hope we will be in the coming years.
Thank you for all that you do for us in Central Massachusetts and for our country. And thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.